Julian Genton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Green Party is supporting this bill. I wasn't on the Select Committee when we heard submissions on the bill, but having spoken to my former colleague who oversaw this through the Select Committee process, Kevin Haig, he spoke highly of the Select Committee process and the officials and the work that they did to ensure that this bill struck the careful balance between meeting the needs of people who are suffering from severe substance addiction and the right of individuals to make informed consent about their treatment. There are occasions in which there is a need for intervention, but it only affects very small numbers of people. And I think the best thing we can say about this piece of legislation is that it vastly improves the Alcoholism and Drug Addiction Act of 1966, which was well overdue for changes. The Law Commission undertook a very helpful report which identified a number of problems with the existing legislation, including that although 2 medical certificates were required before a person could be committed, there was no requirement that either of these certificates be issued by a specialist alcohol and drug practitioner following a personal assessment. The committal process under the previous legislation began with an application to the district court, and families were finding it very difficult to make applications. There were delays and problems satisfying the regulatory requirements for applications. The statutory period of detention under the previous legislation is 2 years, which was quite extraordinary because it far exceeds what would normally be necessary to undertake any program of treatment. The ADA Act made very inadequate provision for review of the detention decision. So that's something that has been addressed by the piece of legislation that we are debating this evening. They were generally considered insufficient safeguards to protect the rights of people held under the Act, and there were few treatment facilities that were certified to accept people under that particular regime, and consequently, there wasn't able to be the flexibility in the type of treatment program available. So there are significant improvements which should both result in greater protection of individuals' rights, potential for review, but also ensuring that there's greater access and treatment available for those individuals whose lives may be threatened by severe substance addiction. I guess I'd just make a couple of other points, and one of them is that fundamentally we're starting to understand that addiction isn't just a personal individual problem. Actually, it can be quite environmental. Financial stress, homelessness, other life circumstances can contribute to addiction, even though there's clearly potentially hereditary or genetic aspects to it. And I think it's important that we take an approach that addresses all of the environmental factors and looks to enable individuals to be empowered to live their lives in a healthy way. Secondly is one concern that we have overall is inadequate funding of the health system, and particularly mental health system, and that's going to pose challenges for the wraparound support services that are needed by people in the future. So while the Green Party does support this bill, and I congratulate the Minister and the officials and the Select Committee for making a substantial improvement to outdated legislation, I think that overall, the more that society is faced with challenges of increasing inequality, increasing numbers of children growing up in poverty, challenges around increasing homelessness, we could potentially be seeing an increase in the incidence of vulnerability to substance addiction. And it's really important that we treat that as a health issue, first and foremost, rather than a criminal issue, and that we ensure that there are sufficient treatment programs available for people so that they're able to get the help that they need when they need it. Because all of us in New Zealand are better off if we don't have people in these dire circumstances.